Good evening, everyone. I heard some call back on this side, but not so much on that side. Let's try it again. Good evening, everyone. That's more like it. Thank you. My name is Mimi Walde-Johannes, and I actually work with the 74 Million. It's a K-12 national education news site, and we are co-hosting this event with Roland Martin and some of our local partners as well. And I just wanted to go ahead and say thank you all for joining us for our Is School Choice the Black Choice Town Hall event series. This is one of the 10 series that we're hosting, and we actually previously went to Indianapolis last December. We were in Atlanta in February, and then we are in Philly, the city of brotherly love and sisterly affection. So thank you so much for joining us. I know the weather hasn't been in our favor, but we made it work, and we're not going to stop now. At the 74, we believe in the power of authentic community engagement, and as a media organization, we really seek to elevate the stories that often go overlooked and untold. And oftentimes that means the stories of marginalized groups, particularly Black and Brown communities. And we want to make sure that we're talking about these issues and representing you all in the most authentic and meaningful way as possible. And I wanted to make sure that before we dive into the rest of our dynamic event, we give a special thank you to our anchor partners, the Commonwealth Foundation. They've been amazing. Mastery Charter Schools, of course, they provided this beautiful venue we're able to have this conversation in. And then Walton Family Foundation as well. We're very thankful for their support. And there are just not enough words to describe how appreciative we truly are. I just also want to say that I'm a former educator. I taught at a charter school and I taught at a public school, and I think this conversation is just so imperative. And not only are we talking about the quality of schools in Philadelphia, but this is a conversation that is happening all over the country, and particularly when we talk about choice. One of the things that we don't do enough of is elevate the stories of how the choice system has worked for so many of our families. And so today we hope to uncover some of those ways that the choice system has benefited our communities, and we hope to continue this conversation afterwards. It does not stop here. We just want to go ahead and remind you, if you haven't done so already, please be sure to follow us on Twitter and on Facebook, and make sure you're tagging us in your posts, because we want to be able to follow up with you and answer any other remaining questions you may have following this event. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and introduce this phenomenal woman, Hillary Beard. She's Philadelphia's very own trainer, writer, speaker, and coach. Hillary is independently employed as a writer, focusing on the health and well-being of Black and Brown communities. She's a two-time NAACP Image Award-winning author, including For Promises Kept, Raising Black Boys to Succeed in School and Life. So let's go ahead and give her a round of applause as she comes up on the stage. Oh, I was like, if she's coming.
Good evening, everyone. The principal met me at the front door. Sister Hillary, I'm so glad that you're here. I'm really excited. We need your research. I have an amazing group of new educators now. I was successful and got rid of all my dead wood. So as the teachers came into the in-service training I was offering, I could tell that the principal was right. People looked me in the eye. They were diverse, new teachers, mature and highly skilled professionals. There were all sorts of teachers across race, across as the training went on, it emerged that there were different teachers across sexual orientation and gender identification. Of course, there was one person who sat in the back of the room with his arms crossed, but by the end of the training, he said, "Thank you. I didn't think I would enjoy this training, but I actually learned some new things." But it wasn't what happened at the end of the training that was so amazing. It's what happened during the training. As I was talking about optimal parenting styles and optimal classroom management styles for educators, the styles that facilitate high academic achievement and support social and emotional health and well-being, and help children behave in ways that we want them to in schools, and so that the doors of opportunity open to them in the world, and which do not. One of the educators raised her hand, and she confessed something. She said, "Every day, at least one period a day, I show up in the box that you are describing that is low in demands of the children, and I'm not particularly disengaged." That's a box where the style is called neglectful. I was like, what? We know that this exists. We know that it happens, but I was blown away by the fact that she admitted it, and not only admitted it to me, she admitted it in front of her peers. I interpreted it as somebody who actually really cared, and that maybe this was not somebody who wanted to be burned out or negligent or neglectful, but I interpreted it as a call for help. And so we had a little bit of a conversation, and we found out that about a third of the room actually struggled with that. And because of this educator's vulnerability, bravery, her willing to be courageous in that moment, her choice, it changed the entire conversation. And so, as a result, we were able to talk about self-care strategies for educators. The teachers who have less of that problem or who don't have that problem were able to share strategies with those who did. We were able to talk about the ways in which all of us internalize unconsciously racial bias. And her choice in that moment changed the conversation. Tonight, we're also having a conversation about choice. Choice about how adults show up in the lives of children. The conversation takes place in many different ways. It took place as that educator in that particular moment chose to be vulnerable, and we have choices tonight as well. As adults who care about and love children, are we going to be brave? Perhaps step outside of our comfort zone. Try something new. Be willing to pierce through the conversations that we usually have and be open to something different, to create a new possibility that might change the life of a child, a school, a community, a society, and our world. So I'm excited to have been invited here tonight to be here, to speak to you, and as well to sit at the feet of the amazing panel that we are going to have. I'd like to thank the 74 million, Mimi, wherever you went, Roland Martin, and all the local and national sponsors for having me. And speaking of Roland Martin, you all know him. You listen to him in the morning on the Tom Joyner Morning Show, where he appears on 100 different radio stations, reaching 8 million people as an analyst. We've seen him on CNN, on Anderson Cooper's show, on Campbell Brown's show. We, those of us who are old heads, watched him on The Lead Story on BET. Anybody remember The Lead Story? For those of us who are not from Chicago, he was in leadership at the Chicago Defender, which is Chicago's equivalent of the Philadelphia Tribune. He has won more than 30 journalism awards. He's won the National Association of Black Journalists Award for Journalist of the Year, and he's won the President's Award as well. He's written 3 books, including the first about his experience covering our first African-American president, President Barack Obama. And he is now running hashtag Roland Martin Unfiltered, a digital show where he covers race, politics, culture, sports, and entertainment, unfiltered, and where he can say what he wants from an unapologetically Black point of view. So thank you all for being here this evening, and with no further ado, I'd like to introduce you to Roland Martin.
All right, glad to have all of you here, glad to be here. I do not want to belabor this, and so we're going to go ahead and get started. Going to bring up our panelists. First off is Toya Algarin, a parent advocate and KIPP Philadelphia board member. Next up is Christina Grant, Chief of Charter Schools and Innovation, the School District of Philadelphia. Lenny McAllister, Director of Western Pennsylvania Commonwealth Foundation. Sharif El Mekki, he is the Principal of Mastery Charter School, Shoemaker Campus. All right then. Brian, how you doing? All right, CEO and President of, is it, pronounce it? Guess it, JSU School, all right. Give it up. Jessica, you good? Jessica Cunningham Akoto. All right then, CEO KIPP Philadelphia. And David Hard, Executive Director, Excellent Schools PA. This is the third stop of this particular tour, but I've actually been to numerous other cities. We've been to Tulsa, Charleston, South Carolina, Atlanta, Nashville, Memphis, Chicago, so many different places. And what is interesting to me is that when we have a conversation like this one, we have people who are wedded to the same system as if somehow it has had great results. And so, and anyone can jump in, so I'm not talking, so anybody can just jump right in. How do you explain to folks in this audience, those who are watching the live stream, those who will see this later, that the current education system is a delivery system? It's not the delivery system when it comes to educating our children. Anybody can jump in.
Well, I think the video, Roland, to your point, and what I've seen that video before, it's a great video. It talks to the point of innovation when it comes to everything else in our world. I mean, one of the things that we understand is that we as black people use social media at a higher clip. We use our mobile devices at a higher clip than the rest of the population. We embrace innovation. When you start talking about things such as culture and art, we have been innovative for years. But it seems as though we fight against that when it comes to education, especially when we look at the numbers. We see that we're behind. We also know that we've been behind everything from, what we were behind economically with Jim Crow coming through the 1960s to where we are right now with the resegregation of America. What we have to do is show folks that it is only one way of delivering education. We're not anti-public schools, but we're definitely anti-bad schools. And so if a public school is a bad school, and we're trying to save lives immediately, we have to look towards avenues that are going to provide immediate relief for those students. That might be a charter school. That might be a scholarship to get into a private school or parochial school. But if we're in the business of saving lives like our ancestors have been for decades, we have no other choice but to find immediate relief immediately.
Yeah, anybody, go ahead. Anybody can jump in. Anybody can jump in.
Just go ahead. I believe that everyone is in the education business for the same thing, and that is to give the children a quality education.
Disagree.
So there's multiple avenues to do that. There could be a traditional public school, there could be a charter school, a highly selective magnet school, or like my school, which is an independent Catholic school. But the bottom line is we want to give the children a quality education. Whatever avenue that is, support that avenue if that avenue is working and productive.
The reason I disagree with that, because we have to be honest. That is, there are a lot of people who are in education who are not there for the children. And I'm just, and the reason I'm putting it out there, and that's not, and I'm saying that because, again, this is what when I talk to people, they say, well, where's the money going when it comes to charters? And I then say, who do you think is making bank off of existing public school systems? And I then begin to say, who are the textbook companies? Who are the software companies? Who are the food companies? And I begin to walk through these things. Who are the construction companies? And folks get real quiet. I have stood in front of teachers and I've said, how many of you know people who have no business being in the classroom? Hands go up. I said, how many of you know principals and administrators and school board members and politicians who are over schools who have no business being involved in education? Hands go up. And so I think we have to put all the cards on the table and admit that if there is any one particular thing that we've had in our society where folks just assume that they can do it, is education. We've had school districts that said, oh, we're going to hire a general to be the superintendent. What the hell does the general have to know about education? Now, there are people out there who people said to me, well, why are you touting education? You're not the teacher. I'm like, yeah, you're right. But I've raised 6 nieces, and as somebody who has had to deal with the school system, there's no person who has more concern about his school system than a parent or the person who's raising the kid. But I think we have to put that on the table, because even when it comes to charter schools, and again, anyone could jump in, there are people who are in this education field who are running charter schools, who have no business being in education, and advocates of charter schools should be running those folks out, just like I want to get rid of the people who are traditional schools.
Roland, I agree with you. I think, I learned from a woman by the name of Kamika Royal that there are three purposes of schooling: social reproduction, social mobility, and social justice. And to your point, so many folks in charge are really about social reproduction. And I'm very passionate about Black folks in particular remaining agnostic about systems, because there is no institution in this country that wasn't, every institution was really designed for our demise, okay? Every institution is designed to keep us right where we are, which is why we have to stay agnostic and where we do have choice, because there are so many arenas in life where Black folks, brown folks, poor folks, women have limited choices. So where we do have choice, we have to really activate that choice and treat it preciously, because the systems, and I'm speaking of even my own system, I have to make sure it doesn't feed into that social reproduction. Even social mobility, I think is pretty problematic in many ways, because I don't think that has served us well completely. But we have to remain agnostic and be really devoted to quality, and schools and educators that prioritize our kids' wholeness as we think about choice and what that means for us.
Yeah.
That's why I interviewed her. That's exactly why.
Well, I do think we should be agnostic about different types of systems. But I got to tell you, the system that they have in front of us, this Philadelphia public school system, has not given our children a whole lot of opportunity, a whole lot of advantages. And you see this in the number of people trying to get into charters. There's over 27,000 people trying to enroll in charter schools this year. I don't think the district had that many kids trying to enroll in it, and they have twice as many students as us.
Because they don't have to enroll. They can just sign up. There's not, come on, David, frame that the right way.
New students, 27,000 new students. Did you have that?
No, but think about, because you don't have to fill out an application to come to school. You just sign up, you come to the district and you enroll your child in the school. So I do not take away the fact that there are 27,000 applications to go to a charter school, and that does show the demand for the seats. But if we want to have a conversation about quality, we need to push for quality regardless of governance sector. We need to make sure that families are sending their children to an excellent school regardless of if it's a district or a charter. And we have to celebrate a parent's right to choose, which I fervently believe in, but we need to make sure that parents are choosing a school that is excellent, not a school that's marginally better than the school across the street.
I would disagree that 27,000 people are trying to get to a seat. I would say 27,000 people are trying to escape a seat that's on fire.
There you go.
Because let's just be real honest. And I think, and again, I like to use the most basic, fundamental, common sense things. Hill Harper and I had this conversation. As he said, would any of us continue to go eat at a restaurant that has horrible food, horrible customer service, but somebody says, yeah, but the ambiance is okay? The answer is no. What I see with 27,000 people, with 20,000 plus 30,000 in New York, what I see when I'm in Houston, I see parents who are saying, I know this is bad, and I will take marginally better than really bad. And I think, and we just have to just call it what it is and own up to that, and then begin to say, okay, what has to be done to deal with traditional public schools that are failing our kids, but at the same time, not try to shut down a charter because that charter may be giving somebody hope that right now they don't have. And that, to me, is the biggest problem that I have when we have this conversation, because that parent is saying, I can't wait for the next superintendent and the next 10-year plan and the next 20-year plan because my kid will be gone.
Guess what? You know what? As a parent, like right now I'm a grandparent, and I was a single mom of 3 children, and my oldest are in their 30s now. And when they graduated from Catholic school, because I went to Catholic school, I'm a first-generation college student, and my mom always instilled education. So I sent my kids to some of the same schools that I went to. And when they were in 11th grade, I witnessed them lacking the basics. Okay, basic.
The 11th grade.
Hello, I'm not done yet. I'm not done. Let me finish. Okay, so the 11th grade, my oldest son, because I'm working hard. Okay, and I'm leaving that education up to the school. So at that point, it's too late for him, right? And then I have a child that's in 5th grade. Okay, and I'm like, what am I can't let him make the same mistake. And then when that's when I found KIPP, and I put my son in the KIPP, and he was on the 3rd grade reading level in the 6th grade. And then in just 1 year, he started to flourish, which I'm like, thank you, Jesus. Then it's time for him to go to high school, and now I got all these high schools in the area. Well, he's definitely not Central Magnet. He's not a magnet school student. He definitely ain't built to go to the neighborhood school. So I sent him to KIPP High School, and that's 3 buses. And then like the 10th grade, first day of school, he gets hit by a bus going to school, because he's got to take three buses to go to school. You know, so now I'm still fighting. So I haven't left KIPP, you know, because now my responsibility is to make sure KIPP continues that excellent education that they're giving to our children. You know, so and then I look at Sharif, and I'm like, Sharif, like, why should I have to leave my neighborhood where I have wealth invested in houses to go find a better school? Why should I just have a parent choice to send my kids to the school that I want to send my kids to?
I mean, one of my biggest concerns, you know, when we have these conversations, I think if we're talking about really bad or marginally better, that means it's not really a choice.
Right.
And so we're starting, and particularly for our communities, it's not just about schools, it's about, like, you know, many services that is supposed to be provided, whether it's clean air, clean food, whatever the case may be. Really bad or marginally better is often what's put in front of Black and brown families, and saying, like, you know, choose. And I think, you know, like, at the end of the day, I can't stress this enough, until we really begin building our own. Like, self-determination to me isn't deciding between really bad and marginally better. Self-determination is saying, we know excellence, we've experienced excellence, we stand on the shoulders of our communities who have been excellent, and they've shown us the way. Mary McLeod Bethune showed us the way. There are other educators who showed us the way. Until we're choosing something that wasn't created for us in its inception, it's just not going to work.
But here's the thing, though. And trust me, as somebody who's run 3 Black newspapers, this is my 12th Black media experience. I've heard that, and I've talked about it. But we also have to be honest with the reality in terms of what it is we can build. Marva Collins, when she left the Chicago public school system and created her own school, private school, she purposely chose not to take governmental dollars. When she retired, her daughter took it over. Dollars simply weren't there to keep the school going. School eventually shut down. 2 months later, her daughter committed suicide. And what's interesting is when I'm having this discussion about charters, we're fighting Black people, Black legislators, Black school board members, Black civil rights groups. And if you do a roll call and ask, where do their kids go?
Where do their kids go?
That's right. That's right.
And I ain't got a problem calling them out. And my problem is, so you've got choice to send your kids to private schools or other type of schools, but then you're saying, oh, no, we can only do this here. And when I make the argument that when it comes to education, if we cannot create a plethora of private schools, I sure as hell will rather say, let's see Black-run, Black-managed charter schools, if that is a pathway to creating it. But the Black resistance is what is amazing to me. And then I hear the criticism like, oh, charter this, charter that, and I'm going, how is it that 10% of the students who go to charter schools are responsible for the problem of the other 90%? It's the most illogical argument, because we are being played. We are being played in this conversation because there are folks who don't want us demanding and running charter schools. And we have to put that on the table and deal with that, because we are fighting somebody else's battles and don't even realize how we getting played. Lenny, go ahead.
But there's another argument to this, and we're talking charters versus public. I mean, if we're talking about school choice is choice.
Well, first of all, I don't talk charters versus public.
I know you don't.
Because charters are public.
I know.
And that's the that's the first thing that's crazy. It's like charter versus public. They're
They're all
public.
public. They're all public. But to me, and this is what gets missed in the argument, every single one of us in here is an American. We all pay taxes. All right? We have black-owned businesses that pay taxes. Do you know that 49% of the kids that applied for scholarships in Pennsylvania last year were denied tax credit but supported scholarships? That $150 million was left on the sidelines because legislators in Harrisburg said, enough of those poor, dark kids got scholarships, no more, because they did a political football back and forth. So our kids are locked out of some of the best schools in Pennsylvania. Now, it's great to talk about charter schools, but I will sit here and brag about Shady Side Academy, where I graduated from in Pittsburgh, and I guarantee you my dad, on his blue-collar salary, my mother as a homemaker, could not have afforded $32,000 a year. But somebody understood that if I got to that school, I could give back to Pittsburgh, to Pennsylvania, to society. And when you have $150 million that could be put back into the system so our kids can escape that burning ship immediately, and we got legislation already passed out of the House that's going over to the Senate now here in Pennsylvania, the question we should be asking folks is, why are we not getting on those black legislators to get on board? Why are they setting our kids up to fail?
For each of you, when you are talking to some of the loudest black critics of choice, do you even look at them and say, have you lost your damn mind? Give me a sense of how you've had to deal with this.
Well, that depends on where we are, right? If it's folks I can say that to, yes.
Hey,
maybe not.
If they tripping in church, I'm going to say you lost your damn mind.
Yeah.
God, no, you cuss, story in front.
Now that is true. But I think my response to some of the loudest folks is that I am no longer willing to have a fake conversation. And I think so much of this public charter versus public district nonsense is a fake conversation about kids, where it's really a conversation about jobs. Mm-hmm. It's a conversation about unions. It's a conversation about money and politics. Mm-hmm. And I am willing to talk about jobs because that's a real thing. For so long, working in the public school district was black folks' ticket to middle class. I'm the daughter of a public school teacher. I get that. And that's a valid conversation.
Yep.
That folks have lost jobs. Folks have, lost pensions, even though charters ain't got nothing to do with your pension. But, but let's talk about that instead of having this fake conversation about what's best for kids, because those are two different things. And so I'm just unwilling to continue with this smoke and mirrors nonsense that is a distraction, to your point, instead of having the real conversations about what's really bothering people about the evolution of the charter movement and the shrinkage of some school districts.
Yeah, I mean, the one thing is it's about hypocrisy, because there's not a single parent that I've met, or the ones that I haven't met, who don't believe in parental choice for kids. Right. It's just a matter, some parents don't believe in parental choice for your kids.
Right.
But they never, ever will give up that sovereignty about their own choice for their own children. And when they say, I don't believe in school choice, it usually means already bought it, so I don't care about it anymore. Already moved, I made the choice to move, and so I don't care about it anymore.
Right.
Or I got a scholarship for my kid, and I don't care about it anymore. There's not a single parent that doesn't agree about parental choice for their own child. So it's a matter of hypocrisy. When you look at our teachers, our educators, half of them don't put their children
in the own schools they work in.
In the traditional system.
61%.
It's what?
61%.
61%. They're saying, I'm not choosing this, but if you don't believe in a democratic society. It's nonsense. It's hypocrisy. And they have to be called out. In Philadelphia, in Pennsylvania, we have legislators who went to a magnet school that's about as private as you can get. Their children went to a magnet school that's as private as you can get. And they will sit there and tell black families, you don't deserve choice. But wait a minute, we've heard that before. We've heard people telling black families, you don't deserve choice. Because at the end of the day, you have no rights that the people think that you deserve to have anyway. We've seen this. This is the same pattern. It's nothing new.
Well, I do want to say this. People deserve choice, and they deserve to go to the school they want. But it's also a matter that there's certain neighborhoods where there's no good schools. And how could you live in a neighborhood where there's no good schools, where you have to send your kids somewhere? People want to go to a close school. And when you see who's able to create new, innovative schools, those tend to be charters in this city. You don't see any new, innovative schools from the district. So what you see is they're fighting the only place where we have a new supply of schools for certain communities. And I wonder what that pushback is about.
I'm the leader of not a charter school, not a traditional public school, but an
What are you
independent
doing up
private,
here, man?
but an independent private Catholic school. And Pew Research did a study a number of years ago ranking the 46 zip codes based on the percentage of families that live at or below the level of poverty. And the 2 zip codes from which we derive the majority of our children, we're in North Philadelphia, which you'll be with us tomorrow, were the number 1 and number 2 districts. The other zip codes, the other 4 of our 6 were in the top 10. Our school is surrounded by persistently poor performing schools. We raise, speaking to the tax credit discussion, we have to raise a significant amount of money because our families are living in deep poverty, which Philadelphia is the poorest city in the country, poorest big city in the country. But we, through raising money, through tax credit programs, are able to help the children in the community to be able to afford to come to Jesus School and experience a quality education. So from my perspective, school choice is not necessarily charter or public, but it's also the opportunity to have a scholarship where you can then pick where your child is able to go to school.
But at the same
And then
time,
the other
it's
thing, a
not
lot
really
of my
school-
friends who I'm talking to about school choice, like Sharif said, have made a choice themselves. And they want to deny the families in my zip codes the opportunity to make a choice.
Go ahead.
I would love to say it was school choice because I tried to get in Jesu too. I couldn't get in there. I have no choice because I was on a waiting list. There is no rule school choice. You try charter schools, our waiting list.
Now when you say on the wait list,
Wait list to get into the school.
right? And part of this issue is also supply, demand, and the
Right.
ability. Like for instance, one of the issues that we see, one of the reasons you also see lots of these waiting lists is because in a lot of these cities, they literally are capping.
Yes.
They don't want to see the growth.
Right.
And you have folks who are denying places that are doing a great job. I'm talking this with Steve Perry when we have our one-on-one conversation, where this is happening and you're going, wait a minute, so you want to stop. Right now in California, I was just in Sacramento with Margaret Fortune, and of the top 10 schools in the state that serve African Americans, there are 3 charters in Sacramento alone in the top 10, 3 of her schools that are the best performing for African Americans. The state legislator in California who wants to put a moratorium on charter schools represents that area. It is the most, and his wife sits on the school board in Sacramento. It is the absolute dumbest thing in the world, and they even put it in the bill, y'all, that if you run an existing charter and another charter shuts down, you can't apply to take it over. Now, if you're succeeding, why in the world would you not want a successful charter taking over another one? Because they don't want to see the growth. And that to me is just what is utterly illogical with these bills. But I want to throw this out because you made a point about you said about 3 buses. I was in Chicago and I asked them this question because I everywhere I go I hear about folks want to go to school that's down the street. And I'll ask the audience this. Raise your hand if your favorite restaurant is where you live. Thought so. When you go out to the movies, is the movie theater where you live? Raise your hand. 5 people. When you want to go party, is the club or the venue or the juke joint where you live? Raise your hand.
Outside of house parties?
Here's your favorite place to shop. Is it where you live? Now I'm gonna go to the panel. So explain to me why our favorite place to eat, our favorite place to shop, our favorite place to party, and where we go watch the movies does not exist where we live, yet we are so hell-bent on saying our kids gotta go to school where we live, as opposed to, I will send my kid across town if that school is going to provide them an education that, I want you to answer the question, I'm throwing out here for a reason. I will send my kid across town if that school is going to provide them an education that is going to change the direction of their life.
Well, part of the reason is because we have been fooled into thinking that our tax dollars are not our tax dollars. So we can give our tax dollars into a system, and our money that we put into the system, we don't expect the same yield that other communities demand. So if you're putting tax dollars in there and you're getting bad schools, you're not getting the same yield and demand politically, you're not getting the same yield and demand economically or anything else. So when you start reclaiming that, that's where you can do everything from, hey, we demand better public schools now or else we're gonna get rid of the superintendent, we're gonna get rid of the school board, et cetera. But you can also say, in the meanwhile, since I am putting tax dollars in, you are going to create more EITC and OSTC tax scholarships so that these kids in my neighborhood, my kids, my nephews and nieces, et cetera, can get to those better schools immediately. And I don't care if it's a charter or not. If it's that Catholic school 20 minutes away, that's where they're going. And by the way, since my tax dollars pay for that school bus too, that's how they're getting there. They're not going to take 3 PAP buses.
I'm throwing it out here because I really want us to deal with it. Go ahead. Then you.
Good schools are part of a good neighborhood. I mean, when you live, people who move to a neighborhood, they look at what the schools look like. And if the schools are attractive, it makes the neighborhood more attractive. If you live in a neighborhood where the schools are dysfunctional, it hurts the whole neighborhood. So yeah, they should have good schools in some of these neighborhoods. They should be trying to create more higher quality schools in those neighborhoods.
Yeah. I think we have to hold 2 truths up at the same time. So yes, all parents, I haven't met many parents who wouldn't fight tooth and nail to get their child the best opportunity possible. And sometimes that tooth and nail is 3 buses. Sometimes that tooth and nail is, look, I'm gonna alter my work schedule or do what I gotta do to get you across town. But it shouldn't be that way, right? So yes, I can't afford, my favorite restaurant in Philly is Friday, Saturday, Sunday. I ain't never gonna be able to afford to live in Rittenhouse. Right? And as much as my ancestors have done to build places like Rittenhouse Square, I can acknowledge that, yeah, I'm willing to drive down there and Uber and all of that, but I shouldn't have to.
Yeah,
and I think those 2 things can coexist.
At school is like, it's like having access to quality food. So you shouldn't have to drive 30 minutes to get to a quality supermarket, yet people have to do it every day. But you should be able, I walk to elementary school. You should be able to walk to elementary school. It should be the heartbeat of your community. A good community is built around a school. I think one of the biggest challenges here is what happens when students get to high school, where it is a complex application system, and our best schools are all across the city, and you do find that high school students have to travel quite far to get to the school of their choice,
Define
regardless
far.
of if it's
No,
a
not
district
one.
or a
Define far.
charter.
What's far?
I mean, she just spoke about 3 buses, depending on
How
where
long
you...
is that?
It's about an hour
I
and a
mean,
half.
if you are a student in
2
the
hours.
Northeast and you go to Masterman, that is a significant commute to get to the number 2 best school in the state. So, I mean, I think a school should be the heartbeat of a community. I think children should have access to a quality school close to where they live, and not just because that's a tagline, but that should be true.
And one thing I think we leave out of the conversation is like, we've been doing that for too long, right? Like there is a emotional and physical and psychological tax on us when you have to take 3 buses, right? And when your mama had to take 3 buses and your granddaddy had to walk
We've
4
been
miles,
conditioned for it.
right? Like we've normalized that in a way that really truly impacts our health. And so like we have to have all of those conversations at the same time because again, it just shouldn't be that way.
Yeah, no, 100%. In affluent neighborhoods, they're not talking about, oh, we don't have a quality school in our neighborhood,
Right.
In those affluent neighborhoods, and so neither should we have to, and I don't believe in mandating, oh, you're in this zip code, so you have to go to this school. I don't believe in that either. But yes, there should be a quality choice up the street from me, and I should be able to go to my neighborhood school if I choose to. If I choose to go somewhere else, Kappa, because I'm like a artist, then I should have that right too. Nobody should be standing in my way.
See, the reason I threw the question out, because you just answered it, and that is we have to accept what is happening, that is being forced to go to a particular zip code. And I threw that question out there because what happens is when I throw that out, I've had lots of parents who literally said, whoa, it didn't dawn on me that I was bitching and moaning about a 30-minute drive when I was making personal choices that was 45 minutes an hour. And I threw that out there because, again, when we start talking about how complex this is, we have places, I was born and raised in Houston, we have open enrollment. We also have extensive magnet school program. I was on a bus 45, 50 minutes a day, going to a magnet school of communications. I have no issues with that because the reality is those 4 years of high school were essentially my first 4 years of college. When I got to college, I was 4 years ahead of every single person on the campus because of that particular magnet school. But when we start dealing with targeted zip codes, and we start dealing with these structures, when we start dealing with the barriers that are being thrown in the way that are being thrown up, we have to put all those things on the table because they then become excuses for a lot of folks. And also, we have to begin to challenge traditional districts to say, okay, how are you also creating these schools? And how are you also developing these schools? Just like, for instance, Chicago, 150,000 fewer students. All these people keep complaining about, okay, they shut these schools down in Chicago. But Chicago literally has 150,000 fewer students today than they did a decade ago. Okay, common sense says if a school was built for 800 kids and it's now 200 kids, guess what? You're now paying the upkeep on a building that was meant for 800. And then when you talk about in New York where they say, well, hey, why don't we actually combine schools, put a charter inside of a traditional school? De Blasio, oh, no, when I can go to office buildings and I can see an office building and there are 50 different companies that are sharing the exact same building. But when you talk about it with schools, people just all of a sudden go, oh, there's no way these things can work. We have to begin to force people to answer these questions because it then gets them out of the, well, there's only one way that we should be able to educate children. And that, to me, is the mistake that we constantly make.
One of the things they use here as a reason that charters cost so much is they say that there's stranded costs. There's costs that are retained by the district even after the children leave the charter. And most of those costs are in the building. If you have 400 people leave a building of 800, like you said, you're paying for excess. You need to start combining. The fact that you don't combine and then say we have extra cost, I mean, that's a game.
I want to deal with some numbers here. So first of all, how many kids are in the Philadelphia public school system today?
126,000.
126,000. How many kids are in charter schools in Philadelphia?
In total, about 70,000.
70,000. About 70,000.
70,000. Of those charter schools in Philadelphia, how many are black-run or black CMOs? Now, let me be clear. let me be real clear. I ain't saying black principals. I'm not saying black board members. I'm saying a black CMO, a black charter management organization.
4. David,
2?
4?
It's more than 2.
No, it's more
It's
than
more
two.
than 2. Oh, 5.
But it's too few.
5.
But you hear that? I mean,
No. I want.
There you go.
Hold on.
Roland, but Roland,
I'm
I
hearing
mean, look,
two.
this is the sector, and we're counting on hands. So
Hold up. 5.
you're making your
okay.
point.
So
yeah.
all right. So how many charter schools are there in Philadelphia?
87.
So there.
87 charter
87
organizations.
on
About
103 campuses.
Right.
Say it again.
There are 87 charters that sit on 103 campuses. So like one school can have multiple sites.
And of the 87 charter schools and 103 campuses, 5 are black run.
Well, I
given
think five
the
were
given
shut
the
down, right?
given the constraints of how you defined it, like developed by, led by, run by, yeah, probably 5, right, Sharif?
Yeah, and I think at least 5 were shut down. So
Now, the reason I'm putting this out there is because I also, one of the things that I believe, one of the reasons why you still have this contention as well, is because what we are dealing with, we're now dealing with the majority of kids who in public schools today are black and brown. You have a ed reform movement that is too white.
Yes.
And let me be real clear with y'all. I'm not saying this because I'm in front of y'all. I've said this at the National Public Charter Alliance conference from the main stage. I said it in the room to all of the funders. I said, black people don't know y'all, don't trust y'all. I said, and you can't talk to black people because black people don't trust people they don't know. And if you have, I just told them straight up, trust me, and y'all need to understand, Steve and I, if y'all think we rebels, trust me, we say this as well. I also believe that's one of the reasons why this is also a contentious issue, because African Americans want to also see us in control of schools, in control of curriculum, in control of the budgets, in control of the hiring. I have been saying for a number of years, it's ridiculous that Friendship Public Charter School is the largest black CMO in America with 13 schools.
Yeah.
When you look at, KIPP has what, more than 200?
Yeah, across the country. Yeah.
Yes, yes, more than 200. You talk about these massive systems, and again, our kids are being served. And so let's talk about what are the potentials to be able to grow black CMOs in Philadelphia.
well, earlier when I talked about like that self-determination.
Y'all notice how it got real quiet, and some of y'all like, did he really go there? Yes.
When I talked earlier about self-determination, you jumped on like the idea of private. I wasn't even thinking about private school alone. I was thinking about whatever it is, but that it's like that ownership and that.
Well, I wasn't thinking private. I was thinking this right.
Yeah. So I think it's a valid point. I think one, the demand for it. When you look at the 60s and 70s, they were cropping up and without the support. And so until we demand for things at that level, until we absolutely demand it, people talk about like teacher strikes, the parent strikes. When is the parent strike? When parents start striking things, then that's when we'll get the change that we need. And we also have to defend.
How black
in
is
Philadelphia, our black organization, and this is from afar because I have not been there, but from afar, it looks like that unity. When you see that old from the 13 colonies with the snake all divided up, that's how I look at some of our black CMOs. They're not a united front, and so they're getting picked off. One here, Imani's going down, that one's going down, that's going down. At what point do we learn that, like, nah, this is separate. This is when you have a united front. They ain't breaking this, but that's what we have to see.
And with respect to growth and scale, it's all connected to how you attract funding, which is, I mean, you've sat in those rooms, and so they aren't a united block, so they can't go to a funder and say, we need an 8-figure investment in Philadelphia to grow and expand our organization. Because that's the type of capital that they would need in order to do the work. And so I think it's the connection between being banded together and having access to capital to grow.
And the racism part of it, like, oh, you're
Right.
black, we're not going to give you money to invest in your own kids. Like that, like we can't separate that.
Don't trigger me because
I mean, but that's real, right?
I am a black CMO leader and one of the few in KIPP. And I moved to Philadelphia and started my job a year ago. And one of the things that's been really hard is you have to fight so much just to keep your head above water. And I'm saying this with like the backing of a national network and all sorts of things that some of my colleagues in other smaller organizations simply do not have at their disposal. And so it's really hard to even do that and try to thrive because your survival is threatened so quickly because you have to lobby to oftentimes the same rooms full of white men who ain't feeling you.
That's right.
And I mean, taking off the hat I have on now, but as the superintendent of a CMO, your growth and scale is all connected to the individuals that are on your board that have access to rooms you don't have access to. So I can be a leader of color. I mean, Steve and I fought that fight hard in Connecticut, but there were legions and legions and legions of people behind us that were making sure we had access to capital, access to facilities, access to finance. So you have to run an excellent product,
right? And that's
but you need an ecosystem of people behind
absolutely.
you.
And so one of the reasons, so just so you understand, one of the huge reasons why we're doing this, I'm not interested in having the same BS charters versus traditional as sort of nonsense. One of the reasons we're doing this is one, to bring together, we did this in Indianapolis and Atlanta, bring together those folks who are in what I call the black charter movement in these cities and say, you need to be forming alliances or coordinating committees in each one of these cities. So if somebody says, I want to reach out to black charter folks in Atlanta, okay, you should know exactly who you're going to. And one, they also are sharing information, who's doing what. And I said, when somebody comes along who wants to open a charter, you need to be one of the vetting groups because you also have the experience. Right. And so we've been working to bring those folks together, put them at the table. And I think the same thing has to happen here. One of the things that I want to come out of this town hall is for the very people who are here to say, okay, there needs to be more black CMOs here. And there should be more of these schools. Okay, how are you working together to create the same alliance to make it happen, as opposed to being on separate pages and then you really can't get anywhere? Because you're right, we have to be able to go to these large funders and challenge them and say, Eva Moskowitz met with you and asked for $50 million. Black folks are having to jump through hoops for $500,000.
Right, but Roland, look at Eva's board.
No.
No, but I'm just saying, like, the access to capital starts with the people who are on that board.
Follow me here. I understand that. But these are the same people who, what happens is, they keep talking about the concept of charters. They keep talking about how important this is. We have to have an infrastructure in place to challenge them and say, put your money where your mouth is. Don't just send 50 million there, but you send 500,000 here. You're not going to get the results in Philadelphia or in Chicago or anywhere else if you don't do the investment. And that's why the organization, to me, has to be there. What is happening is individuals are fighting that battle as opposed to coming with a much more larger entity saying, no, we're showing up in mass, so we'll challenge you. And so that's one of the things that we want to be able to do here as well. I want to also deal with, so we talked about what those numbers are. Let's deal with what is the proficiency of black kids in this city. I want to deal with what's real in the district. What's the proficiency of black kids when it comes to reading, when it comes to English, when it comes to math? Anybody?
It's roughly half the state average. So if I'm giving you numbers, Roland.
Roughly half the state average. I want a real number.
I'm giving you numbers. So for example, when you start talking about language arts, the state average in the state of Pennsylvania is around 61, 62%. In Philadelphia, you're talking about low 30s.
Okay, hold up. Is that the whole district or is that the black number?
That's the black number. From what I understand, that's the district number. That's the district number? Okay.
Yeah.
Say, hold up. So state average overall is 61. Philadelphia district overall is 30-31. What's the black number?
No more than half of that.
You said no more than half of the 30.
Guesstimated, but yeah.
About
it's very low.
15. About 15%, which means that 85% of the black kids in Philadelphia public schools are not on grade level when it comes to, what's that, language?
Language arts, yes.
What's the numbers in math?
Lower. Lower.
No, hold on. I'm hearing lower. No, I need a number. Can somebody give me like 8, 10, 12? Do you know the number, ma'am?
Right.
So you don't have a racial breakdown in the state?
Oh, they did that on purpose.
Yeah, you ain't
They
lying.
did that on purpose because when you started looking at the disaggregated numbers, you saw the real thing.
Sitting here quiet.
We have one organization here that looked at college persistence. Do you make it to a second year of college? There's high schools in West Philadelphia that only 2-3% of the kids make it to a second year of their postgraduate learning. I mean, that's ridiculous. They don't want those numbers to come out like that.
See, the reason I'm putting this out again is because I remember we were in Atlanta and we showed we were a whole bunch of folks and we talked about the feeder system in the city. And so there were 8 elementary schools, there were 4 middle schools, and there were 2 high schools. And so we showed the grades of all 8 elementary schools. And all 8 black elementary schools had Fs. So then we showed the 4 predominantly black middle schools, and there were 4 Fs. Then we showed the 2 black high schools, all Fs. For the first time, the parents sat there and said, well, wait, you mean to tell me that my child has literally gone from K through 12 at all F schools? They literally had no idea. We were in Selma. A sister who was the first black female athletic director of a Division I school. She said, your scores are so bad in Selma, I would not authorize my scouts to come recruit your athletes because the likelihood is there they could not meet the NCAA requirements. She says, I wouldn't even recruit your best athletes. But there's a brother who was on the Alabama Education Association, and they opposed the charters and everything, and they passed a law 3 years ago. They fought it so bad in Alabama, 3 years later, Alabama only has 2 charters that have been created in one of the most illiterate states in the country. But here's what was interesting. He said, full funding is the answer. I said, he said, full funding is the answer. I said, have you ever been fully funded? He said, yes. I said, when were you fully funded? He gave me the year. I said, what were your numbers when you were fully funded? He said, higher than they are now. I said, nope, that's not an answer. And so the sister who was in the audience, she said, I got it. So she had it on her phone. When Alabama was fully funded, the numbers for black kids was 4.63%.
Wow.
I said that means 95% of black kids in Alabama were not on grade level. Now, mind you, 80% of the room came in against charters. When that number was given, the entire room flipped. Because for the first time, they were hearing real information, and it never dawned on them that 95% of the black kids in Alabama were that far behind. And the reason I think those numbers are important because the only way we can deal with this if we're honest with our folks to say, no, we can't keep saying bad schools. No, we need to show you exactly what is actually happening in these schools. We were in Atlanta, and they were opposing us, and I said, okay, I read one school where 5% of the kids were on grade level in math and English. I said, so I need y'all to tell me, how can you defend 95% failure? They shut up and sat down. So if we're talking about how do you change it, how do you see us in 24 years, we'll be a nation majority of people of color. What is required to change what is happening in this city for black kids?
You have to leverage as many things that are as available to us. That's the number one thing. We keep talking about charter or traditional schools, and we have to talk about all options that are out there right now. Because yes, we need to fix the traditional schools, and we need to increase the caps on how many charter schools can come. I mean, you were talking about crazy political things. In Pennsylvania, the charter application goes to the school district. So the competition gets to say yes or no, you get the charter. So for example—
But that's because the state does not doesn't do it themselves. So I just—
Well, they're trying to go.
Wait, hold up. I just want to know. So in Pennsylvania, if you want to apply for a charter school, you apply to the local school board?
Yes.
Is there a state commission
to
that—
appeal to eventually? Eventually.
Eventually.
So locally, what
Okay,
generally happens—
wait, hold up. I don't know what eventually means.
No, so
right
that's the thing,
now,
like, you've done this
give me the
work in-
process right now.
You've done this work in multiple states. In New York, if you want to apply to a charter, you can apply to the State Department of Education or the State Trustees of New York. That is not true here. In Pennsylvania, you apply to the local school district. The local school district evaluates your application, votes it up or down. Then you can appeal to the state.
So
and
the
that
school
appeal
district-
process—
tell you why.
Hold on, everybody breathe. I'm saying this because there are people out here who have no clue about this process. And they may want to actually say, I want to actually do this. So, if you want a charter school in Pennsylvania, you have to apply to the Philadelphia School Board. If the Philadelphia School Board says no, is there an appeal process?
Yes.
Yes.
And that appeal process goes to who?
The Charter Appeals Board.
The state, the
The
Charter
state.
Appeals Board
The Charter Appeals Board.
in the state.
In the state. Okay, gotcha. So there is a second level if
Yes.
the local folks deny you.
Yes.
What is just before I come to you, what's the denial rate of the Philadelphia School Board?
Oh, it's high. It's high.
I told y'all I ain't afraid to ask questions.
It's high.
Huh?
It's high.
Okay, what's high? 70, 80, 90?
well over.
90.
100% the last
It's
time.
not 100%.
It's 100% this year.
Thus far, y'all, we're in appeal. I mean,
When I put in my application, they better not deny me. That's all I gotta say.
wow, Sharif, really?
I'm just teasing. I don't
To the
have
point that you
applications.
made, though, make sure you get a community of people who
Y'all
write you a
gonna go
strong
down there with me,
application
that's right.
so that it's not denied.
Okay, but a
We've
strong
had applications that
application-
have not been denied.
Yeah.
They just have to be
strong
excellent.
Okay, go
Strong
ahead.
application means you have to have kids signed up to go to your school when it doesn't exist.
Right.
That's nonsense.
But that
That is
occurs in
nonsense.
every other market. In New York, in order to submit your charter school application, you have to have petitions signed by parents of potential students to prove that you could meet your enrollment.
But-
That's true in New York, that's true
Roland-
in Connecticut, that's true in New
How does
Jersey,
that make sense?
that's true in Delaware. You literally have to show that you can fill your school. That's not a Pennsylvania crazy. That's a thing.
Roland, let's talk about real numbers, how our kids get jammed up and how they lose real money. Now, I'm going to have to move it to the western part of the state for just a second, but hang with me. When you apply to a charter school in Penn Hills, where I grew up, the Penn Hills School District denies you that charter at the same exact time that they wasted $190 million for 2 new buildings when the population in their schools was going down like it was in Chicago, where you and I both were. So they threw away $190 million to the point where the Auditor General had to go to Penn Hills and say, this is the worst run school district I've ever seen, and there should be criminal charges. But they are still in control of telling local leaders there, we know these schools are bad, we know that kids are failing, we know that they're reading at a rate of about 13% at the state and national levels, and we know we threw away almost $200 million and wasted it, and there's corruption all over the place, but you can't have another option for your kid. That's what our children are trapped in here in Pennsylvania, and I would dare say across the country. That's what school choice is allowing them to be liberated from.
And the reason that we don't have other authorizers, we need alternative authorizers here. The school boards fight that because they say they can't control their budgets if all these charters proliferate.
Which is always an interesting argument to me, because that was the one that was given in Washington, D.C. Yeah. Oh my God, if these charters come, the district is going to evaporate. In Washington, D.C. right now, half of the district, they're in traditional schools. The other half are in charter schools. District still exists. The difference is the district they're serving have fewer students. And that's where, when we start dealing with this reality, that is what this real issue is about, is that we have districts that have gotten accustomed to massive budgets, that have gotten accustomed to significant overhead, and what they don't want to see are thousands of kids leaving the traditional school system because it's going to force them to change the way they do business. And the reality is, the kids are still there. And if we really want to be honest, the money does not belong to a district. It is about the child.
Thank you.
And so this notion that somehow that they are absolutely obligated to every single one of those dollars, to me, is utter nonsense, because if 20,000 kids are being served over here with charters, great, that's 20,000 kids being served, and then you got to figure out how you're going to educate the existing kids you have as well, because you're still getting the same amount of money. And in Pennsylvania, correct me, can you use charter money for buildings?
Yeah.
Okay, well, a lot of other states you can't. So you have to get outside money even for your building, as opposed to being able to use those dollars. And that also changes the dynamic. And so we just have to understand also why people are opposing charters is because they want every single one of those dollars. Because if what's the state number in Pennsylvania? How much money is allocated per pupil?
Right. I'll wait. Because we don't have a per pupil funding.
I got it. Okay,
formula in
municipally,
this
how much money is allocated per pupil? About 18,000. If we really honest, all 18,000 does not go to educate that kid.
No.
And that's what the real issue is when you talk about these budgets. Because when you hear the argument, we have to stop this moratorium on charters because districts are having budget shortfalls, that has nothing to do with the charters. That has to do with other obligations of school districts, and that's one of the fundamental issues there. I asked again, what do you want to see changed when it comes to growing more black CMOs here? What also needs to happen?
Was this to me?
Anybody? Go ahead.
A few things. Leadership has to change. We have to be more, those of us who are in positions of power have to be far more deliberate about growing our own.
Define that. Mayor, council, district, state?
All.
Okay.
You know.
I believe in calling them out specifically.
Yeah.
But go ahead, I'm sorry.
The climate in I think either the climate in the funding community has to change, which is unlikely, or to your point, we have to force a change there, because none of this really happens well at scale without money. I think we need a stronger political voice and advocacy piece to do that as well. So a number of things have to change, but starting with leadership and figuring out how to grow and develop our own talent to run these networks.
We also have to let the mayor not be accountable to a significant number of black and brown children in charter schools, the children in these scholarship programs. He doesn't think about them. He's only thinking about the traditional public school kids. And they're not even really them, they're teachers and the administration. And if that's what motivates him, our kids don't bode well under that.
Okay, so why how many kids again in charters in Philadelphia?
70,000.
And how many of them are black?
6. Tried to count.
So of the 70,000 kids in charters in Philadelphia, 60,000 are black?
No.
Most of them, no.
No. I want a black number.
How many kids are black?
There are 70,000. There's 70,000
95%.
kids in charter schools in Philadelphia. How many are black?
50?
About 50,000 or 50%?
Someone just yelled it out. Miriam, what'd you say? 42,000.
Okay, so 42,000 of 70,000 kids in charters in Philadelphia are black. So please explain to me, how is it that black folks who believe in charters, how are you mobilizing those people to put that level of pressure on the mayor?
That's what I think that.
Go ahead.
That's another example of what we need to do, because a lot of times parents are just, they send their children to the same neighborhood school that might be failing, or they might send their children to a school that's doing just a little bit better, but it's still basically failing. I think that we really need to educate the parents. And when I say educate them, we need to put that passion inside them and light a fire inside of the parents so that they would support the children in the school. Not just like, oh, well, this is the way it's going to happen and that's the way it is. And I mean, I think, and some of the parents are young, they just don't get it. I'm not like an old Gigi in the schools, and you just need to get like the parents involved. If you mobilize the parents, we can make it happen. In the city of Philadelphia, we were there when we started our educational opportunities for families. That's when we mobilized like all the parents, and we got out and we had our rallies. It's just like the stamina and keeping it moving and keeping it a fire underneath it.
And so, and the reason I'm pushing that because what you have here, frankly, is what a lot of cities don't. You have literally a body of people, a massive body of people sitting there, which is your natural mobilization well, if you will, and you got to use it. I mean, you literally have to use it. If the mayor of this city is ignoring those folks, 10,000 need to show up and say, right, you gonna pay attention. Right. Trust me, no politician will turn their back if all of a sudden 10,000 folks show up. I agree. So what do you see? Where do you need to start again to begin to mobilize the folks in this city? Forget the folks who don't like charters or vouchers. Right. Where do you see starting? What should be the marching orders of the people sitting in this audience who agree? Anybody?
Educate your neighbors. So I think that work has to be really rooted and led by the community. And so I think if I had to give one, action item to folks who are here, it's how are you getting the message out and the word about this data, making sure that everybody in your neighborhood understands what that data means, not just for their children, but for generations. Right. Right? And coming together to plan and say, okay, so how do we get politicians, local and at the state level, to really hear us and demand what we know we deserve? Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say something very similar. I think the transparency. You asked a question about Philadelphia's data for black kids. We're up here, we're like so-called experts about Philly, and we couldn't just tell you like exactly what it is. So imagine the families who are like— And that's a problem. That is a problem. Exactly. Imagine all the families who are working on tons of things and being bombarded with stuff to be able to Malcolm X talked about like when people are sad, things don't usually happen. When they get angry, that's when they make change. So if we're transparent and people know about stuff, that's when they get angry and that's when they demand things. That's when you get that 10,000. When that anger fuels like, nah, we're not standing for this anymore.
Right, but what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to get black people to stop mobilizing only when we're pissed off.
We should always be in a state of pissed off.
I'm
always mad. I'm always mad.
No, but it's like for instance, Bennett College needed $5 million or they're going to lose their accreditation. Massive fundraising campaign, they raised $9 million. Okay, and my whole deal was, okay, what is the annual plan
to sustain the money?
Right, and so again, that's why I'm saying, if you've got 42,000 of 70,000, all those people have parents. And you've got a body of people who, frankly, I think are waiting to be mobilized.
I think it's 3 levels. So one is, how do you define quality? And the quality shouldn't be defined by us, but parents should be well educated on how do they know their child attends a quality school, regardless of if it's a district school or a charter school. And then I live on the construction of boards. So if your board that is supporting you are just your friends, that's not the board you need. So you have to—
friends, right? I got you.
You need to think about who's the finance expert on your board, who can get you $6 and $7-figure checks, who has access to real estate, who on your board is a lawyer that can actually show up with you when things go right or wrong. But you have to construct an ecosystem, and I think Sharif just made the point that particularly to growing and scaling schools run by people of color, there has to be an alliance.
Hold on. That's the second time you said that. I am not talking about schools
black
run by people of color. I'm talking about black people.
Right. They all have to come together. They all have to come together despite their organizations and get real clear about excellence, mobilization, and advocacy so that they are seen as a force and not an individual
Go ahead.
school.
Brian.
So Jesus School is a school led by a black person. What we have to do is educate the families, the people on choice, not just charter, not just traditional, but also independent Catholic or independent private schools where we as a school would not exist. We'd have a hard time existing without the tax credit dollars that we raise.
Toya.
Okay, I think the other piece that's missing, and is missing right here on this panel, we don't have children involved. We need to get our children involved in our fight.
David.
Me? Okay. Yep. I think that.
Is your name David? It's the only David on the panel. I'm like,
I had to check.
go ahead.
No, what I think has to happen is that the schools need to do more informing of the parents of what they're doing right and what's not going right, so that, and what's getting in the way. Parents get a call when your charter's in jeopardy or you're trying to get a building when there's some big issue. They should
don't
be
take
getting
them on the journey.
information all the time so that they know what's going on in that school.
All right, then. Folks, give it up for our panel here. We're about to do a simultaneous transition, so the panel is going to come off. Dr. Steve Perry is going to come on up, so we're going to have this conversation. And so I appreciate all of you here. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Give me that microphone right there. I'm going to give Steve, you got a mic on? I'm going to give you this one here. All right. Hey, I need one of y'all men to help the women down from the steps. I can see none of them from Texas. I appreciate it. Appreciate it. Come on up, Steve. Okay, that's fine. Right, you can always tell who from the South. No, we'll be right here. We're right in the middle. So, if you want to share this, we are actually live streaming this on my Roland Martin Unfiltered digital platform on Facebook, YouTube, and Periscope as well. And so, folks out there, they have been commenting for the last hour or so. Put your hands together for Steve Perry, please. Steve, I know you've been chomping at the bit. I had you on Tom Joyner Morning Show this morning. You and I have talked about a lot of these issues, a whole lot. You listened to that conversation. Just your initial thoughts. Is it on? All right, take this one off.
It is now.
There we go.
First of all, thank you, Brother Sharif, for having us in your building. Really appreciate it. It's a lovely space. Clearly, the air conditioning really works.
This is not an old black church, huh?
Jesus, God. You know, I want to start by saying, look at us. Here we are on a Wednesday night, making a decision to change the fate of our community through education. This is the power of black people when we make a decision. What we can do is we can transform the way in which we're seen by our children. Part of our problem is we spend so much time talking about what cannot be done as opposed to looking at what can be done. The fight that we have today is far less than any generation before us. The generations who came before us would have risked their lives to be in this building to discuss this very same topic. For us, it is not illegal to teach black children to read and write. It's just unpopular. For generations before us, it was not just illegal, but punishable by at least 40 lashes and in some cases, ultimately death. We have to accept that on some level, those of us who have the capacity to make the changes that are necessary, have to bear the responsibility of not making the changes. I did not know that a black person could start a school, but I also didn't know that one couldn't. What I decided to do was to start a school because the schools that I found myself in seemed to me to not be schools. They could have been bomb shelters, they could be voting booths, they could be a lot of things, but they couldn't be schools. My first experience in a traditional school was here in Philadelphia at Strawberry Mansion. So in 1993, I was a social work intern at Strawberry Mansion. And at Mansion, they were patting us down in 93. At Mansion, they were having basketball games, varsity basketball games with no fans. So we've been having this conversation here in Philly for too damn long. At some point, we have to get beyond mad and get strategic. We have to get to the point where we decide that enough is enough. You know, we understand that the circumstances that we find ourselves in, we were put in, but we don't have to stay in them. When I came to Philly first, I was amazed because I saw a black middle class. Now, where I grew up, I didn't see a black middle class. I didn't know there was such a thing. There are people here who are the second, third, and fourth generation going to Morehouse. We don't have just the downtrodden here in Philly in the bottoms. We have all sorts of people from all parts of the community. We can do better than this because we know better than this. The question is enough yet? It has to be. We have to be afraid. We have to be afraid of the fact that when I lived on 46th and Cedar, 4 young men went to prison because they shot somebody for $4. That was in 94. It's got to get better. And it will get better when we continue to have conversations like this, but then we turn the conversations into action. I saw a lot of talented people up here, and real talk, I think it's unconscionable that of the 70,000 or so children who are in charter schools, less than 7 of those schools are run or founded by black people. To me, that's unconscionable. I just left a meeting in New York or New Jersey with an organization of African American-led charter schools. It doesn't have to be this way. It just doesn't have to be this way. We have far more talent than this. We can run our own schools, and I got to be really real with you. If we don't prove to just ourselves that we can run our own schools, then who's going to believe in us?
One of the things that you and I have, a lot of people don't realize, I mean, the kind of pressure that we are bringing to bear on this ed reform movement, because there are people who don't look like us, who don't get us, who have no clue. It's amazing how we've dealt with folks who say, well, I don't know who that is, and we go, well, black people do.
Yeah.
And one of the reasons I believe that you still have these problems is because this is a movement where white Americans are controlling the resources and controlling the power. And what I keep saying is we're not interested in being education sharecroppers.
Right. So in Philadelphia, there's 18,299 people who work for Philadelphia Public Schools. 18,299 people who are not prepared to give up their piece of the pie. 18,299 people who are likely middle class because of the job that they have. They ain't gonna punt on that. We have to recognize that in most cities, Philadelphia being among them, the largest employer is often the public school system. And so it's a source of income for those people who work at it, and it's a source of outcomes for those people who are forced to attend it. I'll use Connecticut, where we have one of our schools, or 2 of our schools. In Connecticut, 28% of the adults are African American. 70% of the inmates are African American. 39% of the children are African American. 78% of the inmates are African American. 3 cities in the state of Connecticut, Hartford, New Haven, and Bridgeport, 3 cities send almost 60% of all prisoners to prison. There is a direct line from the sequence of schools that you attend to prison. There is a school to prison pipeline. And when we play ourselves into thinking that, well, if we just give these failed institutions more money, that they will stop sending our children to prison, black children are new cotton. And so for 18,299 largely suburbanites, largely white, largely female employees of the Philadelphia public school system, we cannot expect individuals who benefit from a system that has made it possible for them to live a life that they feel comfortable with, that makes it possible for them to send their children to the schools of their dreams, to live in the house of their dreams, to punt when it comes to forfeiting their own privilege. We have to understand the circumstances that we refer to when we're talking about public education. It's not the Philadelphia public school system, it's the Philadelphia public employment system. And so until such time as we truly understand what we are up against people's J-O-B. We are up against their ability to pay their student loans, to live the life that they wish. They may not be doing the jobs of their dreams, but their life ain't too bad. And so if we're asking them to see our side of the story, they cannot, they will not, because they do not have to walk a mile in our shoes. It is not their responsibility to do so. And so until such time as people here understand what the real deal is, the real deal is that there are people who are employed by the school system, 18,299, who pay into a pension, who have fantastic benefits, that they don't have to prove that your children can read, write, and compute, because they have racism on their side. And as long as they have racism on their side, they can say simply this: the children didn't want to learn. The parents don't care about education. We're underfunded. And they will keep their job and their career, and we will continue to send our beautiful children to prison.
Do you believe that the reason we have such a disjointed, if you will, black infrastructure in terms of charter schools is because you don't have a national entity that is specifically representing them? I mean, we've tried to put stuff together, and then other agendas were coming to the table. People with their Democratic agenda, their liberal agenda, their progressive agenda. We kept saying, no, this is a black education agenda. Because that to me, I think, is the missing piece, which is why trying to bring folks together city by city is a way to try to construct that.
Yeah, so what happens when you grow up as light-skinned as I am, you have to keep telling people you're black. So I got to say it louder than anybody. And then you throw curly hair on the top, and it's just a rap. They speak to me in Spanish. So I think there has to be a declaration and comfort with the fact that we are talking about African-American children. And I need to really be clear on this. One of the problems that we have is that in polite and mixed company, we find ourselves apologizing or trying to connect to other people's circumstances. There is no other group in the history of America who has suffered more than African Americans, and if we're going to talk about a women's movement, then African American women. And so we have to first declare that this is a conversation that needs to occur and specifically directed at black people, because our circumstances are fundamentally different. They just are. Our children are the least served by all types of schools. Some people mess around, think they moved up like the Jeffersons, moved to some suburban community, and they feel like their children are going to do better. But in fact, in schools like those, you will find that there's still an achievement gap. And so one of the reasons why, Brother Roland, that I think that we're in the circumstances that we're in is because we've yet to acknowledge fully and completely that this is specifically an African-American issue.
Yep.
I was just with a funder before I came here. Well, hopefully a funder. I was trying. But what I said to them explicitly was, I need you to understand that if you're going to fund our work, you're going to fund black people's work. And if that makes you uncomfortable, it's cool. We don't have to work together. But recognize that if we don't educate African-American children now, then the circumstances that we find ourselves in should frighten us to our core. If we don't find more individuals who are African-American who can teach, we will continue to suffer through the circumstances that we find ourselves suffering through. The data is pretty clear that when children of color, more specifically African American children, learn from African Americans, they actually do better.
Same about black doctors. Same with black dentists.
It's absolutely true. It's absolutely true. Well, if that be the case, then let's just carry that one step further. Then how much better do children of color do when they are in schools of color, schools run by people of color? We take great pride in our historically black colleges, but then we call charter schools segregated. It can't be segregated if you made a choice to do it. Segregation by design means that you limit a person's choice. Once you allow someone the opportunity to choose, you are in fact doing what the Supreme Court said you must do. Negro children shall forthwith be admitted to the school of their choice. Dr. Martin Luther King said that the American public school system does not know what to teach or how to teach. In his last book, in his last chapter, in 1968, Malcolm sent his kids to private schools. We have been exercising school choice for many moons. It's called living with your aunt. So we've never accepted this notion that the school that we must attend must be the one closest to our house. We put ourselves in an intellectual ghetto when we act as if the only way that we can live is in a certain block radius. Wealthy people do not determine where they're going to live entirely by where they're going to send their child to school. They want good schools, but they don't have a problem sending their child all the way to Tennessee to an all-boys school called McAllister. They will send their children to the best schools, as we have for generations. So the second part of it is why we don't have a national movement is because we have to accept that we have to physically move. We have to sometimes move. My sons took an 87-minute bus ride one way to school every day, to my school. So the final part is this. We have to hold people accountable, because if you don't eat what you cook, then why is it that you want me to eat it? We allow our own community, black legislators, to get away with this profound hypocrisy. We don't sit and say, brother, I saw you at the Jack and the Jill. And I know your black ass don't send your kids to this raggedy behind school. So since you don't do it, Mr. Representative, why must I? Why is my commitment to my community judged by my willingness to forfeit my child's future so that you can keep these 18,299 people who will not send their children to these very same schools employed? So we have to, in the third part, hold our elected officials of color accountable for the hypocrisy of their own life. As parents, they're all about school choice. As politicians, they're all about public school.
When you talked about this notion of being unapologetic, I was at the Public Charter Alliance National Convention. I think we were in Nashville, and there was a meeting, and about 30 people, and all the major funders were around the table, and there were 2 black people in the room, one Latino was in the room, and I was talking about school choice as the black choice. And the brother, Latino, California, he said, I keep hearing all this black stuff, but I'm all about inclusion. What about Latinos? And I said, bruh, you are more than happy to start school choice is the Latino choice. I said, but Roland's here for black people. Now, here's why I'm being that explicit, because if we really want to be honest, it's a bunch of black people who are scared to death of being just for black people. And when I say just for black people, I'm looking at what you just said. I'm looking at the data. In California, the only group that falls below African Americans when it comes to proficiency in all categories of education are special needs students.
Take it one step further.
There's nobody else below African Americans.
It gets even worse. So in the United States of America, the most taken college examination is the ACT. It's the ACT. In the United States of America, approximately 6% of African American children in 2017 passed all 4 sections of the ACT. 6% of black children in the United States of America. Let's take it one step further. In addition to that, what you're looking at is that means that our performance is lower than people who are what they refer to as ELL, meaning English as a second language. Poor white children and all other groups. The African American experience in education is one that is distinctly different. Our kids are the most suspended, referred, and expelled. Take it one step further. Our children make up 18% of the kindergartners in the United States of America. They represent almost 50% of all kindergarten suspensions. So as soon as your little black child enters the system, they are already being penalized by the system. Take it one step further. Nationally, we make up about 18% of the population. We make up about 50% of the incarcerated population. The system is designed to aggressively attack black children. I don't like that. I don't want to say that. I'd rather come here and tell you something different. But I and you would be a fool if you looked at the data and thought that this was an accident. Our school in Harlem receives students from all 5 boroughs. Last year, meaning this beginning of this school year, 99% of the children that we accepted were below grade level in math. 99%. You could not hit a spot on the wall 99% of the time unless you did it on purpose. If those children stayed at home and never attended a school in their life, 99% would have been below grade level. Final part. What we're now seeing is a statistic that I have never seen before. It's academic stagnation. So most of our schools are grades 6 to 12. Always cool when the host does it. And so we take kids in grades 6, 7, all the way up to 12. What we have done is we've recognized that the kids who are coming in, 99% of them are coming below grade level, usually 2 grade levels below. So that's usually 4th or 5th grade. Second, one would think that if we accept 7th graders, they should come in at about 5th grade, 8th graders, they should come in about 6th grade. What we found is that students in the traditional school system, especially African American and Latino, but most specifically African American, have essentially stopped learning at about the 5th grade. So when we take in an 11th grader, their scores are about the 5th and 6th grade. When we take in 12th graders, their scores are about the 5th and 6th grade in both math and ELA. So when you ask yourself the question, what is it that we need to do? What we need to do is to create more opportunities to attend good schools. Everyone knows what the good schools are here in Philadelphia. Everyone knows. There are absolutely no questions. You can make your arguments about state tests. You can make your arguments about why they're not they can't be trusted. You can do all that. But we all know which schools are the best schools. If the city of Philadelphia, which is you, was about that life and committed to making sure that all kids went to great schools, what we would do is you would replicate the good and successful schools, such that you would have more of them than you would have the failed schools. There's a reason why over 100,000 children have left the traditional public schools. It's not just because of charters, because the numbers don't pan out. It's not a direct one-to-one. A lot of them just left. They just moved. But imagine what would happen if you took the best performing schools in the city of Philadelphia or throughout the United States and brought them to bear on the educational challenges. I've yet to meet a child in the city of Philadelphia, a city that I deeply love, who was just born broken. But what I have met are many children who were put in a system that was designed to break them. And it is amazing at breaking them. It is amazing at making them feel that if they are smart, then they are white. If they are committed to education, that there's something wrong with them, that they're soft. This is a system that has been immaculately conceived and maintained year on year. The issue is not one of funding. It is not. The issue is much more pedestrian than that. You don't have a funding gap, you have a belief gap. Your belief gap is simple. If you were to go to North Philly and you were to give whatever child you wanted to an iPhone, and you would go to Chestnut Hill and you were to give one of those children an iPhone, show me the achievement gap. There would be none. Yet this technology that's the highest technology that is available in the retail space, they have intuitively figured out how to use, regardless of the education level. The issue is not that our children are unintelligent, they're simply not being taught. When there's a belief gap, when there is a belief gap, we don't believe that this child is going to do the homework, so we don't give him homework. We don't believe that this child can learn this, so we don't teach it. We don't believe that the parents care, so we don't push the child. And so what happens is, children are simply being taught less, and as a result, their minds are developing into mush, an atrophy of sorts. Not because they don't want to learn, but because people don't want to teach them. And that's what we're dealing with here. What we're dealing with is a commitment, because let's be real. It's not that we don't know how, double negative, we know how to run fantastic schools. We absolutely do. The question is that we have made our minds up that some kids don't deserve them. And as a result, we don't give them to them.
Our live stream went down, but we're back up. So last question for you. I'm also going to take questions from the audience, and so we're going to have someone with a microphone, so get ready for that. One of the reasons why we are doing this is because in 24 years, and I said it earlier, 24 years, America is going to be a nation, majority of people of color. And if the current trends continue as they are, all the numbers that you cited are going to continue. The black-white wealth gap will be even wider. And I dare say, and I've been saying this, that we, as African Americans, we will look like South Africa.
Well, I'll take it one step further. At the current rate of academic performance, it will take African Americans 286 years to catch up. I plan to live long, but not that long.
Which is why we can't get consumed in this silly fight over charters versus public and this and that. No, what we're talking about here literally are the next 2, 3, 4, 5 generations of black folks in America.
Well, Brother Ron, I'll take it one step further. I think that the fight between charters and traditional schools is a red herring. everybody here understands it's just a straight job issue. Like, it's just a straight, and it's more specifically, it's the teachers union. That's exactly who is behind this, 100%. Nobody else. It's them and weak politicians who are afraid of them and who listen to the BS lies that they tell. That's just the fact. Anybody can say anything they want, but that's the fact. But one of the biggest chasms that exists for us in this conversation around education and education reform is a chasm within the black community. What's strange is that there are many African Americans who are middle class who think that because they're middle class that they're no longer as black as the other people. And if you're struggling with how black you are, I advise you to drive your car.
Or just wait for the next housing crisis.
Or just wait for that too. We have to recognize that within our community, when we're talking about 6% of African American children were deemed college ready by the most taken standardized assessment in America, we're talking about all black people, not just the poor ones. It's mighty comfortable for some of us to think, yeah, no, yours too. All of ours. It's not cool for us to continue to act as if we can disaggregate the data, meaning separate ourselves from other people. African American children, by and large, are being beaten in the classroom by poor white children and immigrants who come in not speaking the language. I have seen firsthand children come from Iraq, war-torn Iraq, in the 9th grade and outperform the students, not speaking English, outperform the students from Hartford, Connecticut, on the SAT in just 3 years. Folks, being black is something to be mindful of,
right,
for both the good and the bad.
Questions? All right, Mimi, come on. Mimi, wake up. All right, who has a question? So we got this side, we got middle, then we got that side. So Mimi, come down. We're got a question right here. So here's the deal. Mimi has the microphone. We don't need you grabbing the microphone. She got it. No, wait, we have rules. So stand up, please. Stand up. She will hold the microphone. We want your question. No sermonettes. Give us your name and what's your question.
Hi, everyone. My name is Lori, and I'm a behavior specialist, so I visit various schools in Philadelphia. And Dr. Perry spoke about some of the challenges of, what our children go through, where it's like the belief gap, where because we don't believe in certain things, we just don't teach the children.
Mm-hmm.
So there are a number of schools that I visit, and I'm trying to figure out how these schools are still up and running. And I want to talk about some of the issues that I've spoken to teachers about, but they can't actually put forth. So it's like they know that they have a lot of challenges in the classroom that need to be addressed, but they cannot speak about them because then they'll get a bad report card for the school. That teacher could, put their job on the line, and then these issues are never resolved. So what has to happen so that we can give teachers a forum to talk about, what they need to educate the children?
And what you're describing is the fundamental problem of an existing school, traditional school structure, and also a charter school. Mm-hmm. Because all those barriers you talked about, Steve can speak to it, they are there for a reason.
Right. So I think on one side, we have to, thank you for your question, we have to arm our colleagues with strategies to help them to improve their practice. So that's one side. On the other side, we're always asking children to put their life in peril and snitch. We are always asking them, when you see something, say something. Don't just let somebody do something. Meanwhile, grown people see somebody who's an algebra teacher who has 140 students that she works with every single day, And we've walked by her class, and it sounds like chaos in there. And nobody says anything. And the kids come in, and they act a fool because kids are like rose bushes. When they're properly pruned and trained, they're amazing. I still have the thorns, but they're beautiful. But when left unchecked, they will grow like weeds, and they will act as they are allowed to act. So on the one hand, we must support our colleagues and provide them with the support the skills that are necessary. On the other hand, we must push our colleagues hard. Before we started this school at the charter schools that we run, I started a magnet school inside the Hartford public school system. And people would say, you can't fire teachers because they're in the union. Well, I can, and did, and would again. The point is that this system that we have lacks accountability. You'll often hear people who are opponents of charter schools say that the charter schools lack transparency and accountability. We have to push the traditional schools to be more accountable. When we know that these people who are working in the school are not providing children with a basic, decent education, they need to be called to the carpet, and their administration needs to be called to the carpet. Because there's nothing more heartbreaking for those of us who work with children than to look in the eyes of a kid who's in middle school who's just checked out. That little girl who says, I'm just not smart, and she's already tapped out. That little boy who's decided he ain't never gonna be nothing. I'll finish here. When I was at Mansion, those little boy's name was Gerald. His life's ambition was to be a trash collector, to be a sanitation worker. And he just thought it was dope the way that they would stand on the back of the truck. He thought it was really cool. He thought that they provided a really cool service, and I thought so too. And I was young. I was an intern. I was in graduate school. And so I thought I was, smart enough to show him. But Gerald said that he didn't know how to read. And he was 14 years old, and he was in 9th grade. He had never stayed back. And I said, that's not possible. It's not possible that you don't know how to read. So what I did was I wrote the word stop on a piece of paper because, of course, he knows the word stop. And this 14-year-old, beautiful, bright young brother said, stop. I was shocked. Not one person lost their job who put that child in that situation. Gerald was one of my students as a social work intern because Gerald liked to fight and he liked to hurt people, or so they believed. I don't believe that Gerald liked to fight or hurt people. He just didn't have anything else to do with his time. We have to keep in mind that every single time people are teachers, administrators, lunch staff, security officers, every single time they mistreat our children, those children push back. They don't stay down. If you want to create the perfect weapon, it's not about putting a gun in a child's hand. It's about taking education out of their future.
Next question.
Good evening. My name is Cecilia Thompson, and my concern is every adult who passes a state board does not belong in front of our children. It's not whether it's public or charter or Catholic or anything. It's about the individual standing in front of that child. And the bigger the school district, the more difficult it is for that district to really monitor the teacher, to make sure that they are teaching our children. I know you already said that, but my question is, for families who have children with severe disabilities, my son has severe intellectual disability and severe autism. To me, I don't think I have a choice but the public school, because at least most of the charters in Philly, if he were to go to them, they would just ship him off to an approved private school, not necessarily in the Philadelphia area. So in your opinion and experience as an educator, do families like myself have a choice, or do we have to stick with the traditional school?
So that's a great question, and it's a really important question. And I want to do what I can to answer it completely. So just bear with me if I start sounding real wonky, and I'll try to, any acronym I use, I'll try to explain, just because I think it's important that you hear both what the real name is and then what it means.
And we got about 4 more questions, maybe, so we need to...
So I'm gonna move fast through it. So there's something called IDEA, Individuals with Disability and Education Act. That's a federal program that protects all children, especially children who have an IEP, like yours, like you've just described. And what the law says is that every child should be in what's referred to as the least restrictive environment, meaning the place where they could perform best. And one of the problems that we have is we have yet to design and or develop schools that can provide all things to all children. And because of the history of public education writ large, most of us, especially people of color, do not trust alternative learning settings because we believe somebody's just shipping our child off. And in many cases, that is what used to happen. What has to happen long term, and then I'm going to come back to your short term. What has to happen is we have to develop quality alternative learning experiences that provide the level of care that's necessary for children with acute challenges. And they can be whatever those acute challenges are. Because we have to keep in mind that that child can be successful when they have the amount of support that's necessary. Very few schools, charter, traditional, Catholic, private, have the personnel, when they start talking about resources, meaning the actual number of people and the skill set of people who are necessary to support children. And I don't know, again, your specific child, so please, in this place, I don't want to do that. But I'm saying, when a child has specific and or what they refer to as acute needs, they need to be in the best setting for them. I don't know what that setting is. And so the final part, so that's a long term. Short term, I believe that you as a mom have the right to go and visit the school, explain the specifics of your situation, and look for the best school for your child. I don't know what that is. It could be a vocational technical school. It could be a college preparatory school. It could be a charter school that's a college preparatory school. It could be a music school. I don't know what his or her interests are as well, so that's the final part. There are some children who are high functioning and autistic who have certain other skills. Maybe it's music, maybe it's technology. It's about finding what the skills are that he or she has and finding the right setting. The reason why I am so pro school choice is because I want every child to have access to the best school for them. I have 2 sons. Both of them attend our school. But if I'm honest, probably one of them should be at another school. But it's the school that I trust most, so I'm sending them to that school.
Question?
First, my name is Janice, and I want to compliment you for having this forum. My question, though, is, are you happy with the turnout?
Yes. Here's why. I do not concern myself with empty seats. What I concern with myself with are the people who show up. And so I've never, if 10 people were sitting in here, I will be focused on the 10. Now let me flip it another way. This should not be the only time this takes place. This should not happen only because I came here or the 74 came here. If every person who showed up here tonight brought one person with them at the next one, there will be no seats available. And so we have to change when I was talking earlier about mobilization, when I was talking about how do you organize, we have to understand that organizing and mobilizing is not, you have this battle between Ella Baker and Dr. King. Dr. King felt it was pulpit to pew. Ella Baker felt it was pew to pulpit. What I always talk about is, in order for you to say, how can you make America great, you need great states, which means you need great cities, which means you need great neighborhoods, then great blocks, then great streets, which means you get to have houses on the street, then you got to have that one house and somebody in the house. So what we have to do is we have to focus ourselves on who shows up and not who didn't show up, but then at the next meeting, charge each person and say, you must bring one person. Because unfortunately, when we organize, we're always looking to leadership to do the work, as opposed to somebody saying, no, I'm going to bring one or two people with me next time, and then that changes the whole dynamic.
And that's communication, right?
Yes, that's communication, but that's also individuals accepting the responsibility that I have to also be a willing participant in changing this, and I can't just expect Steve or me or the 74 or the folks, the principal here to do it, meaning somebody. It's no different. You talking about church. People go to the pastor, say, Pastor, if only you could talk to that person I work with, and pastor's like, why don't you bring them to church? People want the pastor to come to their office when he's like, no, you should be inviting your coworker to church with you, and if you got to go pick them up, go pick them up. We've got to have that sort of accountability where we say, people say, I'm going to be able to also work and make this possible. And I'm telling you, with 42,000 out of 70,000 black kids in charters in Philadelphia, Philadelphia should have one of the largest black charter movements in America. You have the capacity right now, but they have to be mobilized and organized.
Let me just quickly add something before you go. If 50% of the churches in Philadelphia decided that they were going to address the issue of education in Philadelphia, the issue would cease to exist. Take it one step further. In many communities here in Philly, some of the largest landowners on some of these blocks are churches. They have the physical plant to actually open schools. And so they can, you can, your church, your pastor, your imam can open schools. Why are you waiting for anyone to educate your children? Final point in this, Malcolm was credited, while I don't know if he actually said it, was saying that if you put your head in the lap of a man with a noose, whose responsibility is it for your hanging? We have to stop expecting people who have never served our community well to decide that this time they're going to serve our community well.
Question, then a final question right here, Mimi.
Hello, good evening. My name is Keith Jacobs. I'm probably one of the few people that travel the furthest. I'm coming from Florida, actually, to come see you all.
Wow. You win.
Long way, right?
Wow. I will go to Ishkabibbles, but that's just me.
Right. I'm the current manager for charter schools initiatives for Step Up for Students in the state of Florida. We have a very strong mobilizing model there. We passed some very aggressive charter bills and voucher bills, and Dr. Steve Perry did speak remotely at one of our conferences in March. I'm responsible for grassroots movement, which it seems like would be very useful up here in Pennsylvania. But my other concern coming out of Florida is most of our cooperation come from Republican lawmakers, but as an African-American former educator, former charter school principal myself, I'm looking to work more with our black lawmakers in the state of Florida. How do we convince them that the movement is for the betterment of our people and get their support moving forward into the next legislative session?
I'm going to start first with the white Republican part, and I'm going to let Steve handle the black part.
Thank you.
Now so before, I'm on the board of directors of 50 CAN, Ed Reform Group. And before that, I was on the board of Students First, Michelle Reed's group. And then when they merged, I joined the 50 CAN board. My first board meeting, Michelle Reed talked about this problem that they were having with the younger workers in their San Francisco office. And she said that a lot of these young workers are troubled by the politicians who we are supporting because of their stance on ed reform. And she said, many of these young workers, they believe in same-sex marriage, they believe in civil rights, they believe they're pro-choice, and we are supporting a lot of Republicans who don't. And so we went around the table and everybody was trying to figure out, and I said, tell them to go find another job. They looked at me like I was crazy. They said, what? I said, the National Rifle Association, you could be a black, transgender, blue hair wearing blind person. But if you believe in the Second Amendment, they don't care. The NRA only cares about one thing, the Second Amendment. You can hate them all day, but they care about the Second Amendment. The problem with the ed reform movement is that it is filled with people who care about a lot of stuff beyond education. Now, I'm not saying that stuff is not important. What I am saying, though, is decisions have to be made that if you are down, if it is about education, that means that you are going to be working with people who might be Democrat or Republican, who might be independent. That means you are a single issue person. You might care about 5 other things, but you've decided this is the most important thing to me. And that has been the struggle that we've had in trying to mobilize black people who are supportive charters, because they say, yeah, man, but I can't get down with that Republican. I said, no, if that Republican is supporting a bill that you support, you tell that Republican, I will support you on this bill. Now, I'm going to kick your ass on the 9 others I care about, but on this one is what I care about. And that is the fundamental problem. We don't want to divorce ourselves from progressive, liberal politics, and we say, well, I can't work with you, even though on that issue, you are in alignment. And that's something that we have to get over, and we have to be willing to say, if this is the one thing I care about, I'm going to roll with whoever is with me on this issue, and that's really the stumbling block.
It tickles me when I hear people say that they don't want to mess with Republicans because they're racist, and the Democrats are not. We have to do a better job in many cases of educating the black and Latino legislators. They have been lied to really effectively by the teachers union, who have played into their sympathy. The story of the poor teacher who has to put up $200 every year out of her own pocket. No one ever says, what'd she spend the $200 on? Decorating her room. Non-essential. We have to help to rewrite the narrative for many African American and Latino legislators to make it clear to them. We also have to raise money, because this is a grown person's game. So your house, y'all got to start doing some fundraisers for them, because you'd be shocked at how little money it takes to move a politician. Some of these unions are giving them $250. $250? You sell black people out for $250? I'm always amazed when one of the brothers and sisters gets locked up behind a couple $1,000. I'm like, damn, it was that hard for you that you want to go to prison behind that? We have to move our community by both educating them and inspiring them. What we're doing with a group that we have called My Child, My Choice, in New York, Connecticut, we're doing some work in California, and respect really what y'all are doing in Florida, is we're working directly with African American Latino legislators. And I'll be real with you. I was at the State House in Hartford last night doing an event. And very often, I'm surprised at how little that the politicians actually know. And this is not a dig. I don't want to make it sound like that at all. In their authentic self, that they just didn't know. They have been told en masse, just regularly, charter schools are private schools. They're profiting off of you. They're stealing money from it. There's no accountability. These are lies. It's not even true. It's not even true. Even the for-profit ones ain't making no money. Do you know how hard it is to make money off of $6,000 per pupil? For real. What are the margins on that? So they've been lied to so effectively and so consistently that they've been turned upside down. What we can do is tell them the truth, that what you're saying, what you're hearing is not true. The final part is this. I spoke to, because most people don't understand, 99% of the people don't understand education politics.
No idea.
99% of all people, even in the schools, don't have any clue about it. So I spoke to an organization called NOBLE, National Organization of Black Law Enforcement Officers. Fantastic group. Smart people, really hardworking. The reason why some of us, maybe decide to get into law enforcement or to avoid some decisions. These are your community police officers. Many of them thought the same things. They said, but aren't you the CEO of, I'm the head of schools. Like, it's just whatever, I don't know what that means. Well, don't you profit from them? I get a salary, but everybody gets a salary. But you're a private organization. Well, then for that matter, so is the United Way. So are the Boys and Girls Clubs. These are all, if that's what you mean, but they're private. I'm public because you got all my records you can read. The point is we just have to educate a lot of people because they just don't know. They literally don't know. And once we explain it to them, they think, oh, snap. So I was lied to miserably to protect the jobs of 18,299 people.
And the problem is, unfortunately, in the movement, you haven't had people who are willing to challenge folks directly. We did this in Alabama. I put critics purposely on the panel in order to publicly embarrass them with facts.
Yeah, I straight call them liars. I'm not that sophisticated.
And then all of a sudden, they have to defend a lie in front of a room full of people, and it never wins. But you have to be willing to actually do that. So I'm not afraid to do it, and that's part of the issue there. Final question down front. What you got?
I'm Dr. Naomi Johnson Booker, and I'm the CEO and Executive Director of Global Academies here in Philadelphia. I have 2 charter schools.
Cool.
Thank you. And I want to commend you because I saw you in Atlanta at a conference, and you keep telling the story, and it's refreshing to be in this room and not be on the end where you're being attacked for doing what's right for kids. Right now, I'm in the middle of a battle with the school district. And let me tell you something about the school district, because they say they're not giving seats, but they gave out to 5 schools that are white CEO and founded operators.
There you go.
And I'm the only black one in this year that is asking for 125 seats over a 4-year period to open my school from a K-8 to a K-12. In this city, which is political, a mayor that runs a school board, and in a state also that I have to fight. I was principal of the year when I left Philadelphia. Now I want to know, why don't I have every black politician, every black CEO, every founder in this city who is African American not helping to fight for us to get more seats? Because 81% of charter schools that have been closed in the last 10 years, 81% are African American. The school district put out something at 5 years, and so it's okay because it was only 61%. Again, where are we and how do we get people to understand, if you really want to change what's going on, like Dr. King said, let the children lead us, because we're not doing it. So last week I took 500 children up Broad Street from City Hall, and we packed City Hall, left City Hall, and went up Broad Street. Now, you know what they're doing to me now? They're shutting down on me, and they're not telling me anything. That's the school district, that's Dr. Height, and a charter office, because see, they take 30% of our money, and somebody was talking about how much money they give, but they keep 30% of it. And I have to do more with less. And by the way, ma'am, it's not, did she leave? But it's not the parent, not the charter schools that put children in APS schools, it's the lawyers that come in and say, hey, they're not doing right, let me make some money off of you and send your child to APS school. The truth has to come out, and you know what? I'm fighting because I'm fighting. I ain't got nothing to lose, and I'm going to keep on fighting. But tell me how I can get this city, the black politicians, also my state reps, all of that, to come along and stand up and be counted.
Your state, I said this earlier, your state reps, your state senators, your council members, the only way they can be moved is with mass public pressure. Leaving here, what has to happen, you have to create in Philadelphia your Black Choice Alliance. Now, let me throw this in. Here's the first thing. Second thing, I do not believe in consensus. I believe in who shows up, that's who I'm working with. So, if there are 10 people, 10 groups or whatever in Philadelphia, and 4 show up, I'm working with the 4. I'm not worried about the other 6 who didn't show up. Then, what I'm doing is, once you create that, then it's, what's the game plan? Brother right here, Florida, he talked about, so what needs to happen is, and this is also why we do this, I need you to connect with him to say, how did you mobilize the folks in Florida? He already has the blueprint. No sense in creating a new one. Where we come in is we use our national voices. We use our celebrity. I talked about Margaret Fortune. Literally, this bill in California, she hits us up. We put that thing together in 3 weeks. We put it together in 3 weeks, and it was in Sacramento. The governor was very well aware that I was coming into town. The only reason I didn't stick around to deal with him the next day was because I had to be in another city the next morning. Otherwise, I would have stayed. But it has to be that level of planning. And yes, those 500 kids, then the next time it has to be 1,000. Then it has to be 2. And then it has to be, we going to drop one day 10, 15,000 on y'all. And then we going to show up, not just in the chamber, we going to show up at your house. We going to show up in your offices, and wherever they go, they gonna see whether these red shirts, school choice is the black choice, they gonna see it constantly, and then all of a sudden it's gonna be like, look, these folks are driving me crazy, because when you say 125 seats over 4 years, y'all, that's barely 30 seats a year. I mean, that's nothing.
It's really nothing.
But that is the only way. The black politicians will not move unless you have massive public pressure.
So mine is a very pedestrian answer. There are people here who came out because you believe that our children deserve a right to a quality education. You've all heard what we just heard. You've heard a sister who many of you already know, and you've respected her work, ask us for help. Now, I would be stunned to know that she would leave this place without help. I would be willing to bet that everybody in here, if we put just some of your resources together, I'm not talking about a dime, not one dime, knows who the politicians are who have sway over her circumstances. Some of y'all know them personally like they're your friends, like you have their cell phone number in your phone. If we don't protect our own, in a very basic sense, then how dare you ever blame anybody for coming for us? So tonight, before she leaves, it would be my sincere hope and my humble request that y'all make your way over to her.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have to agree to something that you cannot do. But if for nothing else, provide her with some access to the people and powers that be that will make it possible for a sister who was at least at one point the principal of the year to have access to more children of our community. Some of you know that your pastor, your imam, or your friends know some of the people who could move this thing forward. So maybe you don't know who it is, but you have access to the people.
So if you belong to a church or a mosque, raise your hand. So 1, 2, don't keep your hands up. Keep your hands for a reason. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. Which means that coming out of here, there should be meetings planned with 20 of those leaders where you are bringing people to the table to explain to them the issue and say why we need your help.
Because what you're asking for is paltry. No disrespect. This is only 120, 130 kids. I mean, in a school system that's got 120,000 who they're not educating. All you're asking for,
right.
I mean, it ain't even it's just a fraction of a fraction of a fraction. I mean, talking about sand on a beach numbers. But more important than that, just a quick history lesson and I'll be done. Emmett Till's mother made a decision to open his casket because she wanted people to see what they had done to her baby in the hopes that it would move our community forward. Sadly, it didn't. That wasn't what started the civil rights movement. It was all that followed that, the organization of not just rage, but purpose from people of all colors. While our efforts, of course, are to move African Americans in particular forward, we didn't get here by ourselves and we ain't gonna get out of this ditch by ourselves. So we're gonna need white allies, Asian allies, Latino, Latina allies, and all other parts in between. So everybody who has access to the resources that she needs, and again, I'm saying resources as a placeholder, just the names and numbers of people who you can say, yo, can you cut it out, please? Can you stop? And can you help the sister out? If all you did tonight was to make that possible, the impact that you would make
right.
on the community and the power that you would show as a community would reverberate for generations to come. That you came together on a Wednesday night and decided to support your own. Doesn't get more powerful than that.
I'm going to close this out this way, and that is very, very simple along the same lines, and that is we're doing this because, when Sister asked about the turnout, do understand that there were more people sitting in this room tonight than the number of people who were sitting in that church in Montgomery in December of 1955. And I say that because one of the greatest mistakes that we make across the board is that we actually think we need 10,000 people to start this whole deal when you don't. All you need are the very people in the room who are committed to the cause. That's actually where it starts. And so when I asked the question, how many people here belong to a mosque or to a church, 20 hands went up. That means that of the people, that's not the people who left. That means that if just the 20 people raised their hands, said, leaving tonight, I am going to go have a conversation with my pastor or the leader of my church, now all of a sudden, 20 people in the room have now massively multiplied the potential of people who we can reach. That's just those 20. Now all of a sudden you begin to see how this organization, mobilization thing begins to happen. How many kids at the school? 800? How many parents we're talking about? which means that's your natural mobilization base right there. You have to use what is literally at our disposal. We use social media, we use all these different tools. We could literally change all of this with just the people who are sitting in this room right now, which is the starting point, not the ending point. But we have to be willing to do it. And that's where the battle is. And so what I want coming out of here, those folks who are from Philadelphia, you should say who is in the room, who is leadership, and we are going to meet after this to say, when are we having our next alliance meeting, and begin to hash these things out. And all I ask you to do is commit to one thing. The one thing might be her 130 seats. It might be, look, hold on, we're not going to put together the 35-point plan. We're going to focus on that one thing right there, and then we get it, then we say what's next. And the reason I say that, because I mentioned Montgomery bus boycott, people love talking about 381 days. The Montgomery bus boycott was a one-day boycott. And when 50,000 black people did not get on the bus, they then said, let's do 5. 1 turned to 5, which turned into 381. It was never supposed to go that long, but they were willing to put the work in. And so that's what our goal is. We are committed to this. If you want to reach out, you can do so. We have no problem coming back because Steve and I ain't afraid to call anybody's out by name. We don't do politicians. No, we actually say the name of the politician. And that's how we roll, and that's how it has to happen. And so we thank everybody for coming out. We had the live stream went down, but it's okay. We have the recording, but they're going to actually re-stream it as well. We want you to share that, but we want all of you to really stay involved. We have resource tables outside as well. Please get as much information as you can. Exchange numbers. Meet folks who are in the room. Let's make this thing happen for black kids in Philadelphia and in America. Thanks a lot. You want to check out Roland Martin Unfiltered? YouTube.com/Roland S. Martin. And subscribe to our YouTube channel. There's only one daily digital show out here that keeps it black and keep it real. It's Roland Martin Unfiltered. See that name right there? Roland Martin Unfiltered. Like, share, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. That's YouTube.com/Roland S. Martin. And don't forget to turn on your notifications so when we go live, you'll know it. Hey fam, want to check out Roland Martin Unfiltered, the blackest show on all of digital, cable, and broadcast. Check out our audio podcast. There's only one daily digital show out here that keeps it black and keep it real. It's Roland Martin Unfiltered. Press play. You want to support Roland Martin Unfiltered? Be sure to join our Bring the Funk fan club. Every dollar that you give to us supports our daily digital show. There's only one daily digital show out here that keeps it black and keep it real. It's Roland Martin Unfiltered. Support the Roland Martin Unfiltered daily digital show by going to RolandMartinUnfiltered.com. Our goal is to get 20,000 of our fans contributing $50 each for the whole year. You can make this possible. RolandMartinUnfiltered.com.